Dear viewers, thank you for stopping by the Microsoft booth at Singapore FinTech Festival. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two partners in this panel. Let me begin by introducing Laurent from Chainstack, a blockchain startup company, and also introduce Lokesh Aman, who is the founder of Let's Bloom, a venture backed by SC Ventures. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourself? Can I start with Laurent, please?
Well, thank you, Tarun, for having us on the show today. It's great being able to try to contribute and explain what we collectively do with Let's Bloom and Chainstack, and hopefully provide some insights to some of the people that will use this show. My name is Laurent de Denis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Chainstack. We're a blockchain focused company. We are actually a managed service company, so we take care of the infrastructure. We were funded back in 2018 in Singapore, and today we help thousands of developer and enterprise customers to deploy blockchain nodes and network around the world.
Thank you, Laurent. It's very interesting and very intriguing to know about Chainstack. Now, with that introduction, can I move on to Lokesh? And Lokesh, could you please introduce yourself and your company?
Sure. Thanks, Tarun. Thank you for having me on the panel. And it's great talking to Laurent as well. I think he's got a very fantastic business. I've been reading about it, and I'm hoping to co-create with Laurent going forward. So about Let's Bloom, it's been we've been incubated within SC Ventures. That's a business unit of Standard Chartered Bank. We started just over 2 years ago, and we've been building a platform for securely onboarding any containerized applications. That's the first part, right? And do it fast, do it cheap, right? And the second part is a marketplace of business applications. These are applications that can be used by our clients for, either atomically or together as Lego blocks to build new experiences and launch them to their clients fast, right? It's really about speed and effectiveness. And whilst doing that, we take care of security and compliance all along the way. So we provide a full managed service as well. I want to just put talk a little bit about SC Ventures. It's SC Ventures been operational for a few years now within the bank. 3 pillars of that within Standard Chartered Bank for the SC Ventures. One is the internal change initiatives that have been going on. The second pillar was the co-creation that's happening with the clients, right, and the internal POCs that are happening with the clients. And the third pillar is really about exploring alternate business models. Bloom is one of the ventures that has been funded, that was funded by SC Ventures. Like I said, we started over 2 years ago. We recently formed the legal entity. We've got some good traction with a pipeline of clients. We've done some deployment agreements, and looking forward to expanding the partnership with yourselves. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to discussing more about what Bloom does and what's the art of the possible.
Yeah, thank you, Lokesh, and again, thanks Laurent for the introduction. I mean, it's very exciting times for both the blockchain industry and for Bloom as well. I want to start with asking a question to Lokesh for yourself first. I've had personal experience in onboarding applications to the bank, and it takes about 4 to 6 months, depending upon what type of application it is, right? Now, with the concept that you brought up in Bloom, it's really defined as onboarding as a service, right? Now, with this concept, whom do you think is going to benefit the most and why?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tarun. So firstly, right, when we say it takes 4 to 6 months, there's some very good reasons why banks are being conservative. If we use that word, because it takes a long time, right? There are some very important questions that they're seeking the answers for, and really, till the time they don't have the comfort, they are unable to launch something or provision something and really make it available to the various development teams and the various product teams within the bank, right? This is not specific. When I talk about this problem, this is not specific to one bank. I think you can literally say this is the norm when it comes to banks across the world, right? So now, if you think about from a business perspective, right, the product guys need to create relevant services and launch them fast. Right? Now, to do that effectively, you've got to partner with third parties. So invariably, you want to make sure that you are able to co-create with your clients, with third parties, create relevant solutions, and take them to the business fast, to the market fast. Right. At the same time, if you think about the about the technology teams itself, in fact, they want to move fast as well. Now, what's happening is there's a gap in the market that we identified, which was for creating a platform as a service in which we have pre-built bank-grade security and compliance controls, which can give you instant visibility on any application that is onboarded onto the platform. Now, by doing that and providing instant observability on that, you make sure that all of the stakeholders, be it from the risk and compliance perspective, be it from the cybersecurity team's perspective, be it from the infrastructure team's perspective, they have the visibility, right? And they have the answers to pretty much all the questions that they need responded to. And frankly, when an auditor comes in or when a regulator comes in and asks them about those applications, they are able to confidently showcase how security, compliance, resiliency, how this is happening, right? And they can stand behind that. So therefore, we worked on creating a solution where it is very easy for someone to onboard their application, right? So it benefits both the bank technology teams. It benefits both the bank's product teams, but it's not just for the banks. It's also if you think about any industry, any regulated industry, be it financial services, be it healthcare, be it government, they have a pretty high bar from a security and compliance perspective. So it helps all of those companies. Plus, it helps the independent software vendors who are selling into the regulated entities, because these are the guys who are asked the questions, right? And if you think about different sizes of these of the ISVs, right? Some of them are geared up, they're scale ups. They've got armies of people and talent, access to that, which is scarce talent, right? And they're able to answer them comprehensively. Some of them do not have this, but they actually have a pretty good idea or a pretty good product proposition that can be launched to the market. So we want to make it easy for them, right, to start transacting with the large players, to sell their services faster.
Okay. Thanks, Lokesh, for the answer. I think as much as saying onboarding as a service, you're also saying agility as a service, and that's what Bloom brings into the market here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the response. And maybe I want to pause on and move on to blockchain and ask Laurent this question. Now, one of the challenges that we're seeing in the fintech industry is the ability for regulators to play a proactive role in supporting environments in the fintech space, in the way we create POCs and pilots and how we test the technology. Now, maybe the question, Laurent, for you is, what other engagement and support do you think regulators need to help in helping companies like Chainstack and other startups in the ecosystem to improve the overall experience in the financial services? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so thank you for this question, Tarun. So to me, this is really kind of a key question of how a startup can work with a regulated industry and work in some way with a regulator. Right? So the fintech regulator is supposed to enable financial institutions and fintech players to experiment, as a team, right? Exactly as Lokesh mentioned, and basically provide a way for companies to innovate, with financial products, financial services in some sort of live environment, but within a well-defined space. So by this definition itself, you find the paradox of the question you're asking, right? The paradox is that the regulator is here to limit disruption in some way, to limit innovation. Yet, the regulator also wants to make sure that it provides a secure and extensive container so that companies like Chainstack, but many others, can actually come and innovate. Now, I think you have a couple of interesting points in this. The first point is that innovation is not a silo anymore, and disruption is not done really mostly by one company, right? And I think you have integration platforms and group of companies, ISVs and innovators that basically innovate together. So you're rarely innovating alone for one particular regulator or for one particular bank or one particular financial institution. So what makes it really difficult to abide by the rule of the fintech regulator and work together with other companies is, what is the scope of the innovation and what is the scope of the disruption you're trying to make. Let's take blockchain, for instance, which is probably kind of a little bit acute because the technology used in blockchain is still not very well understood or maybe not well used and yet to the full scale of what the technology will be able to give us, say, 5 years or 10 years down the road. And at the same time, you're dealing with everything Lokesh talked about, which is compliance and regulation and resilience and level of security, which is kind of abnormal, right? Because the financial industry is extremely demanding with that aspect. So I think depending on the experiment, trying to have the regulator to support these activities can actually be very difficult. And in most cases, I think if you want to favor advanced innovation and more disruption, then the regulator has to relax, some of the legal terms and some of the legal activities that you can actually perform as part of the POC or as part of the sandbox or as part of the activities going on to validate some technology and to validate some process. And that's frequently, or that's quite difficult. And I think that's how you see some of the different regulators around the world being more or less inclined to try different set of technology. And I think it's interesting to be in Asia, for instance, where in Singapore, the MAS, for instance, will have a certain way to build this sandbox and allow disruption and innovation. And at the same time, compare it with other places in Asia or other places around the world where certain innovation would be more welcome or easier to basically be validated by the regulator. Ultimately, I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to validate a business design, you're trying to validate easy access, and you're trying to validate collaboration. And if the regulator think about those three different components and come up with the right mix and the right recipe, then most of the time you're going to have success. And you're going to have companies like Chainstack collaborating with others and enabling easy access and disruption in some way, innovation in a faster way than a more rigid regulator.
Yeah, thanks, Laurent. I think that's very interesting, right? And I think you brought out very different aspects about blockchain and the use of blockchain in the industry. And regulators definitely play a big part in how this whole innovation can evolve from here. But let me ask you this question. I mean, the use cases can go up and definitely there's a lot of hype about blockchain. But how are they being implemented? Do you see that there is a strain in the way there is interoperability of blockchain platforms? I mean, there is Ethereum, there is R3, and many other tools. Now, one part is how do you integrate and how do you make these platforms work together? And the second thing is how do platforms like Microsoft play a part in this evolution? How do you envision what Microsoft can do from here?
All right, so it's a very extensive question, Tarun. So I think the first thing is there was a number of use cases and what has been implemented, and the nature of the financial businesses that we had the opportunity to deal with, either in the insurance or in the financial sectors, together with large banks, show that most of the large Fortune 500 have this tendency to basically try most of the technology available in the market. In the case of blockchain and managed services and infrastructure, you're looking at quite a large number of use cases. So you're looking at private permission use cases, you're looking at public blockchain use cases, and then you look at the combination of all these different technologies that the bank or the insurance company will ultimately decide to stack up in order to deliver a particular solution or particular innovation. We've seen innovation in the financial services across multiple departments within the bank, right? In corporate finance, in securities, in dealing with documentation around loans, around funds, etc. And I think I can safely say that from Singapore to New York, most of the large banks around the world have tried pretty much every combination of what the technology could deliver. Now, how does that move from being a use case and a single step solution that you try and validate for a particular problem, and how do you integrate it into your entire stack and make sense out of it, then is a different question. And that's the second part of your question, which is, so once you have multiple of these use cases being deployed, say on Ethereum or some of the Web3 solution on public blockchain, or together with private blockchain such as R3 and Corda, and how do you mix them together? And how do you make it work together in the same type of infrastructure is definitely very challenging. I think this will probably come in the following 2 years to 3 years, and you'll see better interoperability that will essentially come from use cases converging from different departments within the banks or different departments within insurance and large insurance companies, but also financial companies starting to work together, right? Large players that will have to collaborate using blockchain in some different ways than they collaborate today through third party or through some intermediary. To conclude on this particular point, I think what you're going to see is faster adoption today of most of those silo use cases that I've described briefly, and we could go into some of the detail of some of them. And as soon as those will start maturing, what I mean by maturing is number of transactions will increase, number of participants in the network will increase, number of entities and countries participating will increase. Then you're going to see a more massive adoption, and then you'll see better interoperability, because that's something that will have to happen for the bank to grow and for the use case to scale and go to full production, replacing current processes that the bank or the insurance company are using today.
Thanks, Laurent. Maybe just want to follow up with another question here. Now, what you said makes sense. I mean, the use cases are there. The use cases will get adopted more and more in the next coming future. And then obviously there's going to be more collaboration with different players in the market to make all of this happen. Now, I think the last part of my question was really around to say is, what do you expect from a cloud platform provider like Microsoft, and how do you think Microsoft can help?
So sorry, I forgot the last part of the question, Darren. So why do we work with Azure today, and why do we work with Microsoft? Well, first, we live in a multi-cloud world, and most of the banks we talk to, most of the financial institutions we work with, they basically use multiple public cloud provider. Azure is one of the key parts of their infrastructure, and as such, the integration with the legacy application used by the banks when those applications are in the cloud, but also the ability of having deployment on-prem for some specific use case is very key. So the reason why Azure is interesting for us, and of course an enabler and facilitator for us as part of the process, is really threefold. Number one, it allows us agnosticity in terms of geographical dispersion of our cloud solution, right? Most of the banks we deal with, they have very strict regulatory concern and compliance and requirements when it comes to geographical location of the data. So that's one, right? The second thing is it allows us to connect to some of the legacy applications that might be used or will be used as part of Azure. And that basically is the flow of data from one place to the other. And finally, we can also use Azure as a way to centrally manage Chainstack from our management console, but also give the bank or give the financial institution some ability to manage workloads outside of Azure on their private cloud or on-prem, which is very frequently the case for some application, and use Azure as a central point of control using our management console at Chainstack.
Yeah, thanks, Laurent. I think that was quite elaborate, and thank you for going into detail for us on the panel here. Maybe I just want to move on to Lokesh here and ask him another question here. I mean, from whatever we have heard so far, it's very pleasing to know that there are so many different use cases and there is so much of innovation happening. and people are ready to adopt this, with whatever be the industry. Now, what's sticking in my mind here is, who is the custodian of security, Lokesh? Now, Chainstack has got use cases that can be implemented in the bank, provided regulators and institutions can come together. Now, from what I'm hearing from Bloom, Bloom provides a service where it's not just onboarding, it's faster, which is agile, and also secure onboarding, and that's your tagline. Now, I'm just curious to understand is like, who takes accountability of security when the application is being onboarded? Is it something which is part of Bloom, or is it something the ISV have to take care of themselves, or is it the end customer, which is in your example here is a financial institution? Who will be really accountable for security?
Tarun, this is a fantastic question. It's asked by every client that we go and talk to, every potential client that we go and talk to, right? And and frankly, it's a shared responsibility model. Okay. So we are using, so Bloom is a multi-cloud platform, right? And we use Azure as our control plane to manage both Azure, AWS, and whatever cloud platforms we work with going forward, right? So that's one. Now, as far as the infrastructure layer is concerned, right, the cloud providers are giving a level of assurance on the core infrastructure piece itself, right? Bloom is built on top of that, right? And Bloom provides assurance of the Bloom's platform, right, which has capabilities built into it, which has the security and compliance engine built onto it. It has CI/CD capabilities on it, right? It provides the full assurance from a Bloom platform perspective. And then there is the application layer, right, which when a client is onboarding their application, right, they will always remain accountable for their application. But what happens is when a client onboards their application onto the Bloom platform, we provide observability of that application against the control objectives that we've codified. And these control objectives come from various regulatory bodies, like it's looking at what, let's say, what the MAS TRM requirements are. Let's take that as an example. For instance, like MAS is a very progressive regulator, right? And similarly with other regulators, right? Then it also looks at some of the industry standards. So that's one of the sources of saying what those control objectives are that you need to codify.
Yeah.
Second source is actually the clients themselves, because they are very close to their applications and they have some very pointed objectives that they want to demonstrate to their partners or their end clients, right? That's a second source of those of those control objectives, of the controls that are required. Thirdly, you have I'd say third parties such as the consulting firms, the consulting firms, who often keep track of how the regulation is changing, because this is not a point in time activity. This is a continuous activity where the landscape is changing, level of complexity is increasing every day, right? So how do you keep track of it? So we've got to take in multiple sources of information to figure out exactly how we are going to provide that assurance, right? Now, let's say an application, it has a simple piece where they are not encoding or not encrypting, right, the buckets for their data. Now, in that case, we would make it, they'd be able to observe that that's an issue on the platform as soon as they onboard their application, but they've got to go and fix it in their code. Right. So we will provide the observability. Yes, there are certain things where we have a very hard, very high bar, and that's where we would absolutely stop them, right? But basically, we are not asking someone to do something specifically for Bloom. What they are fixing on their application is at the app level. Now, when it comes to the industry as a whole, if you think about where the fiduciary responsibility lies, if it is a banking client or an insurance client, right, the fiduciary responsibility will always lie on them.
Yep. Thank you, Laurent, and thank you, Lokesh, for summarizing what Chainstack and Bloom does so far. I'm very curious here and trying to understand. Let's say Chainstack is an ISV who wants to onboard into a financial institution here. And Lokesh, can you walk me through with the steps? as to, and I'm thinking, whether you can share with us a demo as to how, this partnership could be brought together. And in somewhere along the lines, you also said that, Bloom as a marketplace. How would Chainstack and Bloom be together in that marketplace? Can you elaborate more, please?
Sure, Tarun. Thank you. Actually, this is, it's a very pertinent question, because when we talk about the onboarding piece, right, that is just the start. The fact is, you want to create a product or a service and launch it to your end clients so that you can either, grow, you obviously want to have a revenue focus, but you also want to deliver a wow experience to your clients. And to stay relevant, you've got to do it quickly and effectively, right? So the way the whole Bloom proposition is structured is in two parts. The first is a platform as a service, which is for secure onboarding of an application. But then through the onboarding piece, because what happens is, when, let's say, Chainstack onboards their application to the Bloom platform, there are a few things that happen. Firstly, we would have done through that process some due diligence on Chainstack itself from a screening perspective. We would know each and every person who from Chainstack who's getting an ID on the platform, who's a user on the platform to onboard their application. We would have screened them as well. Okay, and this would be done instantly and it would be available to Chainstack's customers to see. Okay. The third piece is, when their platform comes on board, they will have observability on the platform itself from a security and compliance perspective, a resiliency perspective, right? And these are reports that they can share with their clients. Right? So again, that happens there itself, and their clients, potential clients, can come onto the platform and see it firsthand. So what's really happening is, firstly, an instant cloud account is being created, right, with the pre-built controls when Chainstack's application is being onboarded, so that you get the full security and compliance posture. That is part of the Let's Bloom certification piece, where when we say Chainstack is Let's Bloom certified, what that means is that a minimum threshold has been achieved by the Chainstack stack itself, if I say that, right? And through that, we bring Chainstack onto our marketplace. Now, every client that we are doing business with gets visibility of the Chainstack's application on the platform, and they are able to invoke or start a POC at the click of a button, right? Provision a sandbox, provision the Chainstack application, and test it out. And once they are happy with it, right, they can promote it to a production environment. So we go right from secure onboarding onto a production instance. Now, another thing which is interesting is, when people are solving these problems or thinking about the whole service that needs to be delivered to a client, it is not just the Chainstack application itself, which is the overall solution. There might be other capabilities. There might be ID screening and verification that you need. There might be some payment services that you need. So these are applications that are available through the Bloom's marketplace that you can use as Lego blocks, right? And we provide pre-built code for that, so that we take the integration hassle away. So you can really create the full experience and test it with your clients, iterate on that, and then take it into production. Okay. Now, I'm happy to play a demo. We'll have a demo. I want to show you what the secure onboarding journey looks like, right? And how simple the process is, because this is where typically it takes 3-4 months, as we spoke about, right? Now things can happen instantly, and they can happen instantly in a secure and compliant manner.
Thanks, Lokesh, for the details about Bloom. Maybe I want to switch back to Laurent here. Laurent, I mean, you've had some interesting detail that Lokesh has shared about Let's Bloom. Maybe I want to ask you this question: is like, how do you think a startup like Chainstack could benefit from what's offered from Let's Bloom?
All right. Well, thank you. And yes, absolutely. I think Let's Bloom is part of the ecosystem that can facilitate the onboarding of different startups in larger financial institutions. And this is basically a journey, right? And this journey is a process, and every step along the way, that helps validating the technology and helping the startup to validate the technology so that it fits not only the bank or the financial institution requirement, but also the regulator, is basically very helpful, right? I mean, in the case of Chainstack, for instance, we're dealing with an enormous amount of security, reliability, compliance set of questions, which are not only unique to the application that we provide and the platform that we provide. It's also related to how it's being integrated and how it's being connected, and how we collaborate with other applications that are part of the stack of the bank. So anything that can help in this process and facilitate the market entry is basically useful, right? Facilitate the onboarding from the regulator standpoint, but also from the bank standpoint is obviously useful. It helps, I think, fostering partnership, which I think is important. And ultimately, it enables the financial institution to benefit from fintech market development in a faster way and probably a more innovative way, and basically build capacity within the regulatory institution and within the banks to basically innovate and move faster. I mean, certainly Chainstack is trying to do this, and together with our partners, we're really hoping that we can actually help onboarding blockchain and networks to financial and financial institution and insurance companies.
Yeah, thanks, Laurent. And it was very pleasant to hear from both of you. Yeah, I think that's probably the time that we have for today in this panel interview, this panel discussion. Maybe I just want to close off thanking both of you for your time and coming together on this panel. And I want to pass the table around, to get some closing comments. Lokesh?
Sure. Thanks, Tarun. It's been it's been a pleasure having this discussion with both Laurent and yourself. I think, firstly, when I think about the mission of Bloom, or mission of Let's Bloom, it is to bloom 1 billion ventures. And by that, what we really mean is, we are democratizing the security and the compliance controls for everyone, so that any independent software vendor, regardless of their size, has access to the same quality of security and compliance controls that the largest organizations in the world have. So we want them to be able to sell faster, right, and sell securely and safely, and service their clients safely and securely. So we are an enabler to that journey. And I'd love to talk with ISVs that you work with and take them through the Bloom proposition. And we hope to form some partnerships with them, of course, with Laurent and with others as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to catching up with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lokesh. Laurent, closing comments from Chainstack?
Well, I'd like to thank you guys at Microsoft for inviting us to this panel. I hope it was insightful. Lokesh, very nice contributing to this panel. And this is a Singapore FinTech Festival. So let's hope that the regulator in Singapore can continue being proactive and even accelerate innovation faster, so that banks in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and especially in Singapore, would become, at the edge and at the leading edge of what can be done with amazing technology such as blockchain, but also others. So I'm looking forward to talking to anyone interested in accelerating this together with Microsoft and together with Let's Bloom.
All right, well said. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Lokesh. Dear viewers, I think we've come to a close to our panel here. I think if you have sat through and listened through the last 30 minutes, it gives you a great introduction about blockchain and what great things that Chainstack is doing in the blockchain space. And obviously, you heard Lokesh from Let's Bloom talk about democratizing onboarding in a regulated industry. So with that, please allow me to close this panel today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, Lokesh. Thanks, Laurent.
Thank you.